Okay, so now I've got the hub off and just got it sitting over here on the ground. You look inside of here, there's this snap ring and this stack of washers. All that's got to come out, which make sure you keep those washers in the right order. I'm not sure why, I just know you have to. So we'll get those out with a pair of snap ring pliers, and then I'll get my tie rod taken loose here, a steering rod, which you just take loose these cotter pins, and yeah, they're just a keeper. And then you take your steering nut off there, and then with some pry bars, we can pry this apart. And once that's off, we should be able to rotate this thing freely to access the bolts that are in the back to take it the rest of the way off. All right, so we got our lock ring out and our washers. That was easy enough. And then got this popped loose. This fault me a little bit. Put a little bit of WD-40 in there, and then actually I was beating on it with a rubber hammer and it wasn't going anywhere, so I put the cowsel nut back on the end to protect the threads, and then just popped it a couple times with actually just a steel hammer here, and that got it to pop loose. So it just seized up a little bit. It's actually got a little, you know, tapered fitting that wedges it down in there. So got that out, and now we're going to be working. So see, now I can spin this free, so I can turn it around and I can actually get to the nuts. There on the top left, bottom left, get those nuts that'll let me take the whole rest of the housing out. So let's keep working. Okay, so I got the tie rod in there off, or the steering arm off, whatever you want to call it. I can't remember which one it is, but got in the back here and got, I don't know if I can figure out what I'm even looking at. Oh, sorry, there. Got the nuts off, so those aren't bolts, they're nuts. But was able to get down in there with just a deep socket, and the ratchet, long handle ratchet. I will tell you that fits real tight in there with the socket. If you got a thicker socket, which I'm using impact sockets, they're a little bit thicker. So tap the back of your socket, or back of your ratchet here. Just tap it with a hammer to make sure and drive your socket on the nut good and tight, because or else you'll just barely be on it and you don't want to strip it out. So got those loose, so I should be able to take the outer part of the hub off now. Disconnected this little sensor here that goes on top. Not really sure what it's for. Maybe something to do with the ABS. And then there's also your little ABS sensor here, which I think, yeah, this whole component has come apart. So I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect it too. You can bend this heat shield up and be able to disconnect this little keeper nut right here to disconnect this fitting, or you could disconnect it up top. I guess either way works, but we'll figure it out. Okay, so with those nuts off the back side, disconnected this little sensor here. Just disconnected up top, because see, this component now is a separate component from that. When you look at the two, you can hardly tell because it's all dirty and looks like it's all one piece, but it's two separate components. So that's why you have to disconnect this. And then we just wiggled this a little bit, and this whole thing is going to slide out, and that heat shield will be able to come off. Okay, so I got that part off. I think it's called the hub bearing, and it all just comes off as one piece. So I'm going to leave the heat shield right there on it, because I don't see any point to, you know, I could just take it off and set it aside, but it doesn't need to be set aside. There's this washer right here that fell out when I pulled it out, but everything else stays intact. This whole thing just slides on over your axle here, and then you see there's some old nasty grease and crap in here. So we'll make sure we re-grease this a little bit when we put it back together. Quick note on housekeeping: when you're taking a lot of the stuff apart, it's all just nuts and bolts, but make sure you take it apart in order and line it out so you can put it all right back in. That helps you as you're putting things back together. You see the next piece and you know what needs to go in there so that you don't miss something. But my wife just brought my helper out, so she's checking things over. She said I'm doing okay, so I better keep busy. Okay, so next up is we've got to remove this axle shaft, and again, it just sets in there as an extension of your axle back here. And so I believe it just sits in there. I don't think I have to remove the whole U-joint. I think the whole thing, I think it separates and this whole thing comes out, but let me beat on it for a little bit and see what I find out. I got my manager sitting here. She found a good seat. This is her truck, so she's got a good seat here, so she's watching over and making sure I do it all right. Alas, I got that sucker out. You watch some other videos, I'm basically watching Wrangle Stars step through step to do this, and props to him on that video. He goes and pulls on his shafter and it just slides right out. Well, mine didn't do that. This bushing here is all jacked up. His was in good shape, mine is not. So I went to pull it out and I couldn't pull it out. Man, I've been beating on this thing and fussing and tugging and pulling, and Yes, dear.
I want to go outside with you.
Okay, we'll go get your boots on and talk to mommy. Anyway, so I didn't even know what I did. I just finally got mad enough, I guess. I yanked hard enough and it finally popped out. But along the way, I went ahead and took the bolt off my top ball joint, and you can see it's pretty crapped out. And I managed to take the nut off the bottom one using the big wrench. But now that bottom one is seized, it doesn't want to pop loose. So I just got to get a BFH on it, pop it loose, and then this whole knuckle will come out. The beauties of a BFH. I had the nut on the threads and was trying to be, you know, relatively delicate with it, as delicate as I could be while still beating on it, and it just would not budge. And finally it dawned on me, you know, the new ball joint is all this piece, so it doesn't matter if I mar those threads up a little bit. So I took the nut off to preserve it because I was beating the crap out of it, grabbed my hammer and just got to pounding on that little sucker, and finally all at once the whole thing just crashed out and hit the ground, which is probably not good, but it's okay. It's a pretty solid chunk of steel. So now we're on to the next part, pressing these old seals out and pressing the new ones in. Okay, so now I'm in my very cluttered shop, and I went ahead and got the first one pressed out, but all you have to know is this is the lower ball joint. You got to do it first so that you then have space to get your C-clamp in here and do the upper. But there is a snap ring, which you can see mine was severely seized up and no good, so it was stuck in there. I was trying to take it out with the snap ring pliers and it just wouldn't come out, so I ended up having to pry it and peel it out with a flathead screwdriver. But once I got it out, then I was able to get my the rental tool here for the ball bearing press, or ball joint press, get it on there, and I was able to pop it loose. But just like Reinstalling said in his video, they gave me the press kit and the 4-wheel drive adapter kit, and it's still not enough. So I was able to press it about 1/4 of an inch in, and then it bottomed out against the against this bushing here. So luckily that was enough that I was able to get it, kind of break it loose, and then I was able to just drive it the rest of the way out with a bar and a hammer. So that's the bottom one. Let's try to get the top one. Okay, so we got our two old ones off. The press worked fine on the upper, just the lower is where it didn't work right and I had to drive it out, but it worked fine on the upper. Here's our new ones, looking pretty. And the new bottom one comes with the new snap ring, which is good because I messed that old one up. This kit also comes with a grease zert. It looks like it's got my nut that I need to replace the factory nut. It's got, it's even got the cotter key to go in the castle nut on the top one here. So that's great. It's got everything you need for the new parts. So I'm going to get the new ones pressed back into the knuckle here, and then we'll head back out to the truck and try to get it put back on. Alright, so we got our new ball joints pressed in there, not for a lack of cursing, but got it done, and now we're going to see if we can't get this thing get this knuckle put back on. So notice the bottom grease zert, or the bottom ball joint has a grease zert in it. The top one has this little cap, and they say you're supposed to be able to turn it out whenever you do the rest of your work or whatever. Take that cap out, put the zert in, grease it, and then pull out the zert, put the cap back in. But I don't know, we'll see how it lines up in there, see how it fits. It'd be nice to be able to leave the zert in, but I don't think I'm gonna be able to. But anyway, let's get this wrestled up here and try to get it put in. My manager here says I'm doing a good job. Okay, so we got the new ball joint in, pressed in, set it back in the knuckle, got the knuckle put back in, and got the bottom lock nut on. Don't forget to do your rubber bushings. There's a rubber bushing there, rubber bushing there. I'm not really sure what that top one does, given that it doesn't actually touch anything. I had to reread the directions to make sure that was right, but yeah, I guess all it does is, it's not actually for any sort of control to pad anything. It's just to keep moisture out of the bushing, I think. So you actually have to press that on, or it's a lot easier if you just use the press to put it on, because it's kind of hard to fight it on there without it. Got that on, got my, I think they call it a camber nut or a camber fitting back in there. It's just a little sleeve that makes sure that your bolt here is centered up. And then they've sent a new castle nut and cotter key, and so I'll get that put in, and then it's just rebuilding what I took apart. Okay, so I got the top castle nut on, got the cotter key in. Now this is as far as I can go on the right hand side for right now, because I tore up that, well, it was already tore up. But this seal here on the axle, you can see that's all chewed to shit, and all the different metal bits and pieces on that seal were wallered out and not looking good. So I've got to take that over and see what I need to get to replace all those. I mean, they looks just all around broken and bent and nasty. That's why I had such a hard time getting it out. But I'm gonna start on the driver's side now and try to get it all pulled apart and get those ball joints replaced as well. Okay, so ball joints are in, that's great. Now we got to fool with this stupid thing. This seal or bearing, whatever it is, it goes on the axle. The old one was all messed up. That's why it was a pain to get off. The new one looks nice and shiny and symmetrical like it's supposed to be. Well, went to O'Reilly's to see about getting a puller. Well, they didn't have a puller big enough to pull this off, but they did have a hammer big enough to just drive it off. So we beat the old one off. Now the trick's going to be beating the new one on. So it just sets on there and it just presses on, actually. Normally you would press it on, but I don't have a press, so I'm going to have to just try to get it lined up the best I can and then try to tap it on with a rubber hammer, get it started on there and then get it just driven on the rest of the way. So if you go real slow and gentle with it and you just work slight one side, other side, and work your way around, usually you can drive these things on. They're not easy, but you can usually get it done. So I'm going to give it a shot. Okay, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I'm also running out of daylight, so I'm trying to hurry. I apologize. I got the new ball joints in, as I said. Got that new seal. I put a clamp on either side to kind of hold it level and keep it from bouncing up and down. And then I actually just used a bolt here. I had to set up my vise in the shop. And I used a bolt as a little rod and a 16-ounce just framing hammer, and just tapped it on there and was able to get that new seal driven on there. And then shove the whole mess back in the axle there. And again, use the bolt actually as a driver to help seat it further in, because it wants to hang up and not push in real easy on its own. But I think it's in there far enough, and now I'm going to get my outer hub put back on and get the nuts fastened down. Okay, that part's in and done. All four of the bolts in the back are in and tight, and so far, which of course that's not engaged, so I don't know, but it was spinning by hand before I took it apart. Yeah, I can still turn it. Yeah, I can turn it back there by hand, so I think that's pretty good. Okay, put our piece back in the middle here, our hub, and hook our little brake lines and stuff back up, and hook the tie rod in back up. And hey, actually put the brake caliper back on with the new brake pads, because that's where all this started. So this was the bad ball joint on the driver's side. Jump, jump, jump. The top one, not much better, but the bottom one was real bad. So let me get them pressed out of here and replaced.